1. Due to the death of Chester Bennington and the recent video of Sinead O'Connor, I would like to raise the awareness of mental illness, in particular depression. For most people who never had this problem may never fully understand what it really does to people. It's not just a mental problem, it's a combination of a series of mental and physical problems that work together to keep one ill both ways. First, it was my sister who had this problem years ago, when she was in her early 20s, and had her career just started. There was a period of time she hardly slept. She had no more than 3 hours a day for months. Then she could no longer communicate with people outside of work without breaking down. My mom first noticed that she was never hungry. My mom hid all the food on purpose for days, and she would not ask for food. And when my mom cooked a whole bunch of food for the whole family, she would eat everything which could feed more than 5 big men. And yes, when my mom tried to talk to her every time, without one explanation, my sister asked if it would be okay if she just disappeared, as she described that she could not feel anything. She said that she could not see things clearly or hear things clearly. Everything is blurry. And she could not taste anything. She gained lots of weight in a very short period, and she lost lots of weight in a very short period. Then it was me, years later, after many things such as work issues, family mess, and other emotional distress all piled up for a long time. I had been gaining weight like crazy. Then one day, I was told I needed to go home, for I could not stop repeating the same thing over and over and over and over at work. When my manager told me that I needed to stop, I laughed. I know now I acted weird, and for some, I was insane. After I stayed home for a while, I could no longer communicate with people without breaking down. Now this is the truth. I could not sleep for days. I mean literally no sleep. The second I closed my eyes, some muscle somewhere will twitch and wake me up. There was this time I took 4 sleeping pills, and could not sleep, which my doctor told me no more than 2 each night, if possible, take half of 1 pill. I was so exhausted, but when I shut my eyes and fell asleep, then a muscle pulled and I opened my eyes, seeing that the clock is 1 minute later than the last time I saw it. Yes, that made me want to take the whole bottle of sleeping pills, but my dad was told to take days off just to watch me. I could not eat, I did not feel hungry at all, but my dad tried to make me eat. I could not taste anything, like literally put a spoon of salt in my mouth, I could not tell. I could not chew, my jaw was stiff and hard. And when I tried to move, it would hurt real badly. Even when I tried to take some soft food, I could not swallow. I felt like something in my throat just blocked there. Nothing goes down. Same stiffness happened to all my other muscles at different times. There were times I could not walk, and then after 15 to 30 later, I would be able to walk again. Although all my senses were dull, my hearing ability increased. I could hear everything, which kept me awake too. I could not bear any sound, so the whole house was deadly quiet. My dad was reading a book on the couch next to me, while I was sitting there just staring at nothing. He turned a page. Immediately that gave me a severe headache. I asked him to stop rudely, as I was angry and scared at the same time. The thoughts of ending my life from time to time had different reasons. There were times I felt this is no way of living, I might as well just end it. And there were times I felt there is no meaning of anything, so why keep going this nonsense? I know many people may think all these happened just because some people needed attention or just self-pityness. In a sense, yes, at that moment, those people really do need attention. But I want more people to understand that people with those conditions had no control. I am no doctor, but this is what my doctor told me. My brain was telling my body to do or not to do things because of different reasons. Certain imbalanced hormones can be one, and yes, lack of positive thoughts can be another. I guess what I am trying to say is that it takes a lot for one to reach out, seeking for help, or even to open up to others in this kind of situation. 2. I had a Ouija board that was on the back cover of this ghost book I borrowed from the library, and I didn't even do anything with it, didn't dare play with it or anything, because of what happened before. But my friend had died a few months prior, and I only just thought in my head, thinking the question, "Are you there, Fu?" The guy I had told about that had died in my story. And that night, I got held down by something, and got paralyzed and couldn't scream out for help, or anything. I got scared, and it stopped. Maybe it was him letting me know he was there. The minute I got scared, he let me go. And my son's Thomas the Tank Engine toy started going off and talking on its own too, which never happened and can't happen. Even if it fell somewhere, the button can't be hit accidentally, cause it's sunken in and you have to put your finger in it to activate it to talk. It would just keep repeating, "Off we go, sir, off we go, sir," when it's supposed to cycle through what it says with different lines each time you press it. My friend Fu used to always say, "Let's go, Phil. Let's go, Phil," similar to "off we go." Anyways, the next day I returned the book, and nothing happened after that. Thomas went back to his normal speech cycle, and never talked on its own anymore too. So even just having a Ouija board there, not playing with it, can make spin-out shit happen too. Freaky as. Never going near one again. 3. The following story is of an event that took place in February of 2017. Some of the details may seem random, I promise though, that everything I write has a purpose and will, hopefully, make the story clearer and answer any anticipated questions. I'm a 33-year-old female and I live alone, in a modest apartment located on the outskirts of a small village in central Wisconsin. The village was first settled in the early 1850s, and while it sits far enough north not to have seen any Civil War bloodshed firsthand, some of its first men and boys must certainly have enlisted. My apartment is located on the second floor of an eightplex, which means that there are often people around making the types of noise that people usually do in their day-to-day lives. The unlocked door from the outside leads into a communal hallway, where the mailboxes are located. There are stairs going up parallel to the mailboxes, and the top of the stairs is directly outside my lockable apartment door. When you walk through my door and it leads into a very small but open entryway. There is a vinyl wooden floor there that continues into the kitchen straight ahead. To your left is the carpeted living room. This part of my apartment is, aside from a pillar, open concept. This story takes place on a lazy Sunday afternoon. I was lounging on the couch in my living room, hesitantly dozing off while watching TV. I say hesitantly, because I suffer from sleep paralysis. I've learned over the years that, for me, this condition is usually triggered by sleeping on my back. Due to the shape and size of my couch, lying on my back is really the only comfortable position to be in, but I generally am able to keep myself from falling into a deep sleep while lying on it. Not so this day. I must have fallen asleep hard, because the next thing I knew I was struggling to get up off the couch. I'm not sure what sleep paralysis is like for others, but I'm going to do my best to describe here what it's like for me. It begins with feeling as though I am awake, but just barely. My eyes feel so heavy as if I could fall asleep again at any moment. Then I realize I can't move my legs, my arms, my anything. I don't feel paralyzed, but I feel as if every part of me is too heavy to move properly. If you've ever used ankle weights in exercise, it's a feeling kind of like that, but much more intense and, of course, all over your body. This sensation also applies to my vocal cords, and I find that I can't speak, shout, or make any noise at all. No matter how many times I experience this sensation, I always struggle in an attempt to move or say something. I think, if I can just swing one leg off of the couch to stand, I'll wake up fully and this will be over. I will struggle until I believe I've successfully moved some part of me, or shouted for help, at which point I'll realize I've only hallucinated or dreamed that I moved or spoke. In reality, I am still in the same position. No one has heard me, and I begin the struggling process over again. By now you should realize that when I say struggle, it's more of a mental struggle than it is a physical one, even though I believe it to be physical when it's occurring. It's exhausting and frustrating nonetheless, and it can last for anywhere between a few minutes to well over an hour. Accompanying the struggle are hallucinations, and not just the one I described above about being able to move. Previously, I've believed that people and old family portraits were escaping their frames, reaching down to smother me. Once I even thought I saw a friend of mine standing in my closet, shuffling back and forth, looking at the floor. It sounds silly now, but at the time these things were terrifying, and they felt absolutely 100% real. No matter how many times I experience sleep paralysis and these hallucinations, they always feel as if they are happening to me in our reality. I can try to tell myself in the moment that they are not real, but for anyone who has experienced an hallucination, you know that if you're seeing it, it feels as if it's truly happening to you, logic be damned. So this was the situation I found myself in that Saturday afternoon. I was laying on my back, struggling to get one leg over the edge of the couch to stand, when I heard the commotion outside my door. It's not real, I told myself, knowing full well that telling myself that wouldn't help. Whatever it is, it's not real. I had fallen asleep with my head angled slightly, so from my position on the couch, I was able to see my door and entryway with only a bit of strain. I decided to keep an eye on the situation while continuing my struggle to wake up. The commotion only grew louder though, which grabbed my attention. It sounded like 2 pairs of boots thundering up the stairs. I relaxed some, thinking that these were just neighbors of mine, goofing off and being rowdy. That's not typical of my neighbors, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. I could hear 2 men talking and laughing, making a huge ruckus directly on the other side of my apartment door. There was some scuffling, some muffled shouting, exclamations, and then 2 young men came tumbling through my door. Literally through the door. The door did not open or budge or break. These 2 guys came barreling through the door like it didn't exist, landing in my entryway, still play wrestling with one another. They were probably in their late teens or early 20s. One was blonde and the other was brunette. They were dressed almost identically in blue uniforms of some type. The jackets they wore were a darker blue than their pants, and the buttons on them had a dull shine. After a minute or so, the brunette, laughing, sat back to catch his breath, and that's when our eyes met. I blinked, my eyes wide, staring at him, and his laughter caught in his throat as he stared back at me. It was this that alerted his friend that something was off, and the blonde slowly turned around to face me. I locked eyes with him, and he scrabbled back against the entryway wall next to his friend. For what felt like minutes, I stared at them, and they stared back at me, their eyes wide in what seemed to be shock or fear. Maybe both. I stared back at them, uncertain. This did not feel like a normal sleep paralysis hallucination, and yet I was still in the midst of a sleep paralysis episode. What's happening? I asked myself, as I began to struggle to move or to say something, anything. Can she see us? The blonde asked in a whisper. No, the brunette said, somewhat uncertainly. The captain said he's never experienced it. Anyway. We continued to stare at each other in silence until the brunette took a breath and asked, Can you see us? I blinked in response, with what I hoped was purpose. If you can see us, blink 3 times then, the blonde ordered. I blinked 3 times. Get the captain, the blonde practically shouted, shoving his friend's shoulder, pushing him toward the door. The captain, the brunette spluttered. Why not Richard? He should know what to do just as well. Who are you fooling? The blonde asked. If she's really awake. He trailed off. "Right, of course," the brunette nodded, scrambling to his feet and lurching once again through my door. At this point, I knew something was wrong. This was not like my usual sleep paralysis hallucinations. This didn't feel disjointed like a dream. This felt real. And I was terrified. By this point, I had started breathing heavily, almost hyperventilating out of fear. Tears pricked my eyes, threatening to fall. I couldn't move to wipe them away, which frustrated me more. What was happening? I was so confused. The blonde, seemingly just as confused as I was, told me, "Don't worry. The captain will know what to do." His tone was reassuring, but he looked almost as terrified as I felt. It seemed as if we both knew that this wasn't normal. This wasn't supposed to happen. But what was it that was happening? Despite the assurance that the captain would know what to do, I didn't want the captain's help, whoever he was. I just wanted these men, these complete strangers, to go away and leave me to struggle awake in peace. We both reacted to the sound of boots on the stairs, and the blonde stood up, straightening his jacket. The brunette walked back through the door, turning earnestly to an older gentleman beside him. This older man, presumably the captain, was dressed much like the younger two men, but it was obvious his uniform was of better quality. His buttons shined brighter, the jacket was cleaner, and he had an air about him like he was used to having his orders obeyed, his word accepted, and his advice taken. "So that's why we wanted to ask your opinion," I heard the brunette telling the captain. The captain clapped the brunette on the shoulder. "You did well to get me for this," he said, calmly, finally turning his gaze towards me. "It's highly unlikely she's awake, of course," said the captain, speaking to the two men but facing me. "Richard thinks himself some pumpkins at these situations, but he's never dealt with a woken one before." The blonde and brunette stood behind the captain. They scoffed their agreement at Richard's skill set, and my gaze flitted toward them at the noise. This seemed to get the captain's attention. Of course, it is possible. He trailed off, lost in thought, and my eyes darted back toward him, locking with his. I was clearly following the conversation. "Ask her to blink 3 times, the blonde blurted out suddenly. Before the captain had time to ask me, I blinked 3 times. See? The blonde said, and the brunette chirped excitedly. There was a pause then. My, the captain murmured, taking off his gloves and shoving them blindly at the brunette man behind him. "Well, in all my time, I've only ever seen one other. But that hardly matters now," he said, walking hesitantly toward me. "You're awake then, eh?" He asked quietly, gently. There was nothing to fear in his tone or his behavior. But I was full out crying at this point, not trying to hold back tears. I was still struggling to move my arms or legs to get up off the couch. I was scared, and every part of me showed it. My heart was beating so hard and fast that I thought it would explode or burst out of my chest. I felt as if I was barely breathing and gasping for air, but I knew it was doubtful I was actually making a sound. "Hush, hush," he tutted at me, kneeling down next to me. He was too close to me. I didn't want him to be so close. I tried to control my breathing, but it was useless. I felt like I might pass out. "I can write this," he told me. "It will all be over in a second." His hand reached out toward my face, his middle and index finger extended a bit farther forward than the others. "On 3, he said, his hand getting closer and closer to me, reaching out to touch my forehead. 1, he began. My eyes focused on his extended fingers, watching his hand come toward me. 2, he continued. I closed my eyes in anticipation. What was going to happen? My brain raced through absurd possibilities, frankly. What was it? Was I going to die? On what should have been 3, I felt his fingers touch my forehead, directly between my eyebrows. The touch was cold, a type of icy, complete coldness that I've never felt before. It was a cold that penetrated into my very core. And at that touch, I leapt off the couch, completely awake, able to move my arms, my legs, my everything. I stood there gasping for breath, my face still streaked with tears. I was looking at where the men had just been, but of course, there was no one there. I sat back down as my heart hammered in my chest. I took a few minutes to collect myself, before resuming my normal Sunday afternoon activities. That sounds anticlimactic, but what should I have done? I obviously never completely forgot about this incident. Though I was able to shake it all off within a relatively quick amount of time, I had dismissed it as a new mutation of my sleep paralysis. A few days following this incident, it did occur to me to look up the phrase "some pumpkins." It was a part of the conversation I remembered clearly, probably because I had never heard it before. Turns out "some pumpkins" was a phrase used in the 1840s. It basically means that someone thinks they are the best at something. I found that weird, but I thought I must have encountered it at some point in something I was reading or watching. I never did find out who the Richard they were referencing was, though. There were a lot of Richards back then. The logical part of my brain knows that this incident was just another weird dream, another weird quirk of my sleep paralysis. But then there's another part of my brain that questions the logic. A part of my brain that hears the footsteps crossing the vinyl flooring in my kitchen in the middle of the night. 4. My father has owned an Indian restaurant for over 30 years now, and we have had many creepy encounters with some members of the public. My father's Indian restaurant is called the Nawab Indian Restaurant in West Houghton, Bolton, Manchester. My father's Indian restaurant was the first Indian restaurant for that specific area. There are more now within this area, but it's a good name that my father's restaurant has, with being the first for that area. I have worked for my father as a waiter. West Houghton, Bolton is more like a village where everyone knows each other. It's a community that shares many values and an old English tradition. My father has served a generation and he is very well known, but at the same time while I was working with him, we encountered many weird people. West Houghton, Bolton is changing though now, into more than just some village, but a town and a city. Here are some creepy people that have visited my father's restaurant. Number 1. The Drunk What Man. Was once a man who used to come into our restaurant, only when it was about to close up for the day and we were balancing the amount we made. He was always drunk to the point where he was struggling to walk and would speak random things like, "What?" And he kept on talking to himself, about the people he would like to murder. He never ordered anything, but we just gave him something small to eat, and he actually paid for it. He always unusually had large amounts of cash with him. This smelt of illegal cash. One day he strolled in drunk into our restaurant, drunk to the high heavens, and he was smiling to himself and talking to himself. This time he had finally murdered someone and how proud he was. Then his attention turned towards all of us, and his look became negative. He started speaking to himself about how he may have to kill all of us workers in the restaurant now, as we heard him say that he had murdered someone. He put some money on the table and started wobbling out and saying, "I may have to murder you all." And we never ever saw him ever since. Number 2, the Crying Woman. A woman used to come into our restaurant, mid-busy, and I remember the way she was looking at me. She was giving me this hateful stare, and then as soon as my father turned up, who was also the owner and manager, all of a sudden she burst into tears. She was begging for money, and it went on for 15 minutes, with people watching. My father gave her some money. She tried doing this again and again on other days, and every time she would give me, and only me, this hateful stare. My father finally couldn't take her, and told her to leave quite firmly. Then she stopped crying and gave this disgusting, hateful, and evil stare towards my father. There is a back way which customers can come into our restaurant that leads onto the market street. She would slowly walk up there and then stop and turn to look back at us, and give us that hateful stare again. And she kept doing this until me and my father decided to just ignore her. We never saw her again. Number 3. There was a man, a tall man, who used to come into our restaurant, mid-busy, and just stand in the middle of the dining area, just staring at people. He smelled a little funny, and some of our customers were beginning to feel creeped out. When I asked him if he would like to sit down and order something, he would just say, "No, I'm okay here," and give me a quick smile. He did this for a whole month until my father got firm once again and kind of forcefully made him get out. I remember the customers cheering for my father. He was one weird, creepy dude. He just stood there in the middle of the dining area for hours on end. He never wanted anything but just to stand there in the middle, and he never smiled. He had this depressed, sad, bitter look on his face. Only when I or some other waiter asked him if he wanted anything, he would give a quick smile and say no. Number 4. The Roof Kid. We have had many incidents of naughty children climbing onto our roof. There was once a lonely kid who climbed on top of our roof and started to cry. He was crying because he wanted to come down, and then after a couple of hours of just sitting on her roof, after we all tried to help him down, he comes down himself and smiles. This only happened once. Then one day my father did some shopping for the restaurant, and when he came back with some ingredients the chefs needed, he told me that he had spotted that drunk man again, the crying lady, the tall standing man, and the little boy all hanging around together having a smoke. They all knew each other, and later that day a policeman came into our restaurant and started to talk about them. We expressed our experiences as a restaurant with them. The policeman then told us that the 4 people, including the little boy, are a gang that terrorizes and causes trouble to restaurants. Many other restaurants within the area have had similar experiences with that gang. Finally, though, the gang had all been taken away. 5. I was 14 years old when I almost drowned. I'm 44 now, so bear with me as this is a 30-year-old memory. I was spending a summer in Vermont with schoolmates, when one day the teachers and counselors decided to take us to a lake for the day. Someone decided it would be fun to play Ring Around the Rosie. As we were dancing around in a circle singing loudly, one of the girls in the group 5-stepped off a ledge, a drop-off. I don't really know what to call it, but this causes a chain reaction since we are all holding hands. When one fell, we literally all fell. Crazy because we weren't that far in the water since none of us could swim, so for safety we played close to the shore. My memory afterwards is of something that took place in minutes but feels longer. As I clearly watched the girls in front of me falling in, I still feel the yank on my arm pulling me under. I release the hand holding mine and struggle to the surface. Although I have no swimming skills, I can tread water, float, and do a little paddling. So I separate myself from the group and begin to do my thing. Immediately someone yanks me by my foot and climbs over me. I try again, barely coming up for air, before someone uses my shoulders to pull themselves up. Down I go again. I feel as if this happens 1 or 2 more times, before I start getting pissed and I start yanking at people. Sadly, later one of the girls said someone ripped a necklace from her neck that her dead grandmother gave her. I knew it was me. It was actually about this time I began to feel bad about what I was doing. I didn't know her grandmother had given her the necklace, and I stopped grabbing people. I also had another thought at this time. Fuck it. I couldn't get out of the water, and I wasn't going to retaliate against my classmates by doing the same thing that they were doing to me, so fuck it. As I started to sink to the bottom, I slowly watched the people above me get further away. When all of a sudden I was surrounded by a lot of light, and I could hear a rushing sound in my ears as I quickly began to rise to the surface. When I broke free from the water, I could feel a helping hand on my back, supporting me, as I did my paddle thing. With their help I was able to paddle to the shore, and as I crawled up on the sands, I smiled, and turned around to say thank you, but there was no one there. When I say no one, I mean no one. The lake was empty, the water was calm, and I was far enough away from everyone that I would have seen someone walk by me to congregate with the others. I got up, walked over to the group, and asked who had helped me. Apparently everything was so chaotic that some of the teachers and some of the boys had almost drowned trying to save the other girls. I was told no one had helped me because they didn't see me in the water. Angry Tina's back, so I'm like, what the fuck? Did they really leave me in the fucking water? I shrug and go sit by the water's edge, trying to figure out what happened. Later, one person even said they thought I could swim, so... This person later became a friend, so I was able to tell the story to her mother, who said an angel helped me. The next week, the counsellors took us to a river or creek, some crap, and I was back in the waters. The other girls thinking I was crazy, because we'd almost drowned the week before. Typical teen response. Whatever. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Scary Subscriber Stories 57. Thank you very much to everybody who sent their stories in for use in this video. If you have a story, then please do send it over to kingofthecities@gmail.com. Any and all stories are welcome. I might do a bit of a polish on it if you're not too confident in your writing, but as a rule I don't need to do that to most stories, so it's if you want, that's something I can do. So that's kingofthecities@gmail.com. You can find the email in the description of this and every video. It's near the top, and it's also on the screen right now if you happen to be looking at the screen. Okay, I'm just going to cut this outro short because my throat is screwed yet again. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.